Already, we have our panelists in studio. We have this morning with us Dr. Machira, who is a criminologist from Editorial University. Also, we do have with us George Musamali, who is a security analyst. We do have with us as well Captain Wanderi, who is an advocate of the High Court and also a security analyst. And also joining us this morning, as you can see him taking his seat, is Simiyu Werunga. Simiyu is a security analyst as well. And of course, we shall be joined later also by Professor Midamba, who is the Vice Chancellor of KC University and also an expert on defense and foreign policy. So we have a lot to cover today. We're looking at what is happening in the world. Of course, also we'll be following what is happening here in the country as well when it comes to security. You can chime in, hit us on Twitter. Live&TV is a Twitter handle. Live&TV is a profile name on Facebook, and 20505 our SMS portal. But as always, let's see what is happening in our dailies as well. The good, the bad, and the ugly. We get to checking what is on the front page of the Daily Nation. And must tycoons behind Mexico Maize, as questions are asked as to how a country meant to maintain a grain reserve ended up with no food. Billionaire food merchants who have previously imported grain are starting to emerge from the shadows. And you have this story well fleshed out for you on page 2, 3, and 4 of the Daily Nation today. Preach peace, Tuju advice. Advices Raila on polls. That is a story that you can follow on page 5. And Sonko picks Vivo MD as running mate. That story also is covered on the page 8 of the Daily Nation. You bear their muscles to join defense forces. Youth bear their muscles to join defense forces. That is a story you can follow on page 9 of the Daily Nation today. Let's see what we have on the front page of the Standard. Joho names new running mates. Picking deputy, Mombasa governor names journalist Francis Thoya as he seeks second and final term to replace his number 2, who has defected to Jubilee. That story is on page 9 of the Standard today. And of course, you can have also his details here as a sidebar. You have the profile of Francis Thoya, the media personality served at Standard and Nation. He was born in 1972 in Mombasa, studied journalism at Augustine University in Tanzania, and the rest of the details are there as well. Let me just give you all the highlights that we have in the dailies. We have also the People Daily. Maraga tells of NASA over threats to court. Chief Justice defends the independence, integrity of judiciary, asks politicians should desist from interference with Jubilee, and opposition locked in bitter exchange over demand by Raila and his team that IBC withdraws its appeal over vote tallying. That story tucked away on page 6 of the People Daily today. I want to show you what we have also on the front page of the Star this morning. Allow me just to load it up for you quickly, because it seems now I haven't loaded up for you as I look it up for you this morning to tell you what we have also on the front page of the Star. And this is the splash today. State House picked Sonko running mate. Vivo Energy MD Polycarp unveiled as the corporate face behind candidate. President's aide Jomo Gesaga and Solicitor General Muturi interviewed prospective candidates. And you have this story well fleshed out for you on page 4 and 5 of the Star today. And also, relief, 90 shillings unga unveiled as government subsidizes maize is what we have on page 6 of the Star. Health Ministry issues Ebola alert, says no reason to panic. Medical Services Director Dr. Jackson Kioku said information on the disease will be provided to incoming and outgoing travelers at all points of entry. That story also, you can follow it on page 8 of the Star this morning. We want to see what we have on the front page of the Business Daily. Maize dealers windfall in 6 billion shillings subsidy plan. Big gain for importers as the government moves to lower cost of the Kenyan staple, whose rapid price increase has shot to top political campaigns agenda. That story, you have it tucked away on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. Kenya on high alert as Ebola hits DRC is another story you need to follow also inside the Business Daily today. Shell Kenya CEO Igathe plunges into politics. You can follow this story inside the Business Daily this morning. A quick look also at what we have across the border. We can start with the New Times. Actually, this is what I have this morning. I don't have the Daily Monitor and the Citizen. I will show you that much later in the course of the program. But genocide, Rwanda faces extradition from Denmark. This is the splash today on the front page of the New Times. Expedite Food and Medicine Agency creation, says government. That is what we have also on the front page of the New Times. Justice Ministry toughens against delayed, abandoned projects. You can follow this story on page 8 of the New Times in Rwanda. Editorial cartoons are here as well. But before I go there, we can see also what is headlining the front page of the International New York Times. And this is how it looks today, or the latest issue. The priming of a certain Mr. Trump. This is an opinion piece there by Paul Krugman, and you can follow that story as a sidebar there. And little hope in Iran that election will lift fortunes and rearranging global trade. This is what we have on the front page of the International New York Times. Let's move on and we see what we have on the front page of the editorial cartoons as well. This is what we have in the Star. And this is what Victor has drawn for you. Who is a crybaby here? My way or no election? This is what we have according to Victor. Of course, this is NASA, who is a crybaby, and you can see all the ballot boxes are thrown every which way there, and the pacifier as well. And we can see also Stano has something for us this morning in the People Daily, and this is all about cybersecurity, cyber cafe. And we can see a child there, or a toddler, asking, "Mom, why are there soldiers outside cyber cafes?" And she says, to prevent cyber attacks. Of course, we know the ransomware that is out there trying to infiltrate every computer, especially with the Windows software. And this is what Monene has drawn for us today. Debt surrounding us. And of course, we can see still getting more money borrowed from China. Our ties stand on a concrete foundation. And what is a concrete foundation, and who is pulling away the cat? All this is saddled to Wanjiku, who is carrying the baby there. And of course, Kenya is being saddled with so much debt right now. But they're still saying this is sustainable. And I wanted to show you also what we have on the front page of actually the editorial cartoon, a very interesting one that should solicit our discussion. I don't know where it's gone to, but let me try and see if I can get it again for you. This is what we have in the Standard. According to Gado, a big day for President al-Bashir. Trump in Saudi Arabia. There will be a summit in Riyadh on Sunday, and apparently we understand that Sudan's president has been invited by Saudi Arabia to Trump meeting. So this also will be a basis of a discussion here with our panelists this morning. But you can grab a copy of a Daily Nation, also a copy of a Standard, and other papers for these riveting stories as well. But for now, let's see what we have in the highlights. Government unveils cheaper maize flour, but questions over transparency boil on. Civil society groups raised flag over IBC readiness, 86 days to general election. And Sudan's president invited by Saudi Arabia to Trump meeting. Good morning, I am Debarl on air. You will from today purchase a 2 kg packet of maize flour at 90 shillings despite the brand of product. Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Willie Bett has announced that as soon as Wednesday, May 17th, subsidized maize meal will be on the shelves for Kenyans to access. This after government signed a contract with millers to bring down the cost of Kenya's staple food. The government is expected to bring into the country 5 million bags of the grain to cushion the suffering of Kenyans, at least until farmers are able to harvest the crop on their farms.
The 2 kilogram packet of maize flour will retail at Kenya shillings 90, and 1 kilogram packet at Kenya shillings 47 shillings.
We are mopping any maize. We are mopping any maize through negotiated prices, through negotiated arrangements, to ensure that we get that maize, sell it at subsidized prices, so that we get the 90 shillings for 2 packets to our Kenyan citizens until we get our maize, from our farmers come October.
As we speak now, we are using both what was available locally, even in our strategic reserve, and what has come from our imported commodities to ensure that now it is milled by our partners and then availed to our Kenyan farmer, our Kenyan consumer at Kenya shillings 90. Na serikali imeamua hakuna ile kitu ambaye inaweza kutusuia hata kama ni pesa kutusuia ili tusisaidie Mkenya apate hii chakula kwa pay ile ambaye anaweza.
Still Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Willie Bet is defending the government's decision to oversee the offloading of the 29 metric tons of maize last week, even though I should say it was brought into Kenya by private businessmen. The CS has come under fire over the move, but says he only did so to ensure that the quality of the maize was good and safe for human consumption. According to the CS, the decision, I should say, to allow for the importation had been arrived at earlier in the year when the government allowed for zero rating on the same as a means of mitigating the effects of famine and drought. However, the source of the concernment is one that also remains mired in confusion. Initial reports had indicated that the maize had been sourced directly from Mexico, but the trade PS appears to have contradicted Bet's statement. The timing of the importation as well as the cost were viewed with suspicion, especially in the light of the fact that the government had, as early as October last year, sounded the alarm over the shortage of maize.
More importantly, for me as the minister to assure myself that what is coming is even of the quality which is required, but not to go and receive. I mean, there is people who receive it, but I was to check whether it was of good quality and to assure so that I could talk to you confidently that actually we have maize which is fit for human consumption. We are expecting more ship from South Africa and Mexico. More grain is coming out of Zambia through the road.
Maize is from Mexico. It was grown in Mexico. Do you know how ships operate? You have big ships hanging around in the ocean. It's business, looking for places to sell maize. So the maize was imported from Mexico into South Africa under storage.
Government has not imported maize. Government opened importation of maize to the private sector. And the private sector has imported. The first ship arrived. The other ships are on the way. This phenomena could only have come, and you know it's an estimate, it could only have come in 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks earlier than our estimation. So to me, the estimation was very, very correct, because by January, February of this year, we knew that the harvest of our second season harvest had started, was not good because of the prolonged drought and because of rain. And that is why all these other mitigation measures was put.
Of course, food is very critical as a matter of security. And of course, we have our panelists this morning with us to take us through what they think about this development of the maize flour in the country. Well, a good relief for many of us in the morning, knowing that that has come down to 90 shillings per 2 kg packet. And we have with us this morning Professor Midamba, who is the Vice Chancellor of KCA University and also an expert on defense and foreign policy. We have with us Captain Wanderi, an advocate of the High Court, and also he is a security analyst. Dr. Machira, a criminologist from Editorial University. George Musamali, security analyst, and also Werunga Simiyu, who is a security analyst this morning. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Debarl.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Debarl.
All right, let's begin with you, Captain Wanderi, first of all. This development of the maize, we can't call it scandal as it is, but of course the puzzle that shrouds it. First of all, why are we here? Well, we know we had earlier warnings from the meteorological department about drought, because everyone seems to be raising accusatory finger to drought right now.
It's not an accusatory finger, Debarl, and that's a fact. Way back in November, December 2016, the Climate Prediction Center, CPC, the Famine Early Warning System Network, FUSE, and the National Drought Management Authority did start issuing bulletins on the state of the climate not only in Kenya, but the entire East African region. And one of the things that they reported that there had been suppressed rainfall and suppressed and poorly distributed rainfall in high potential areas, which raised the attention to those who were concerned that there would be drought and subsequent famine and shortages of food. How did we get here? We have the strategic grain reserve. It has a number of trustees. It is a government fund.
Yes.
It has 4 trustees, I think, or 5. You have the Ministry of Interior, I think the permanent secretary, the permanent secretary in charge of special operations like this, or disaster operations, the permanent secretary finance, and the permanent secretary agriculture. These are the people who should be answering questions. In fact, why did they not go into the market early enough to purchase whatever little grain there was? Of course, the short rains were very low, but these people ought to have acted earlier or given advice because they are the controllers of that fund, national fund. It's the amount of money that is either used to buy and have grains in the reserve. And if they notice that the stocks that we had, because there are people who should be schooled in stock controls and optimal level orders, then they would have raised the attention of the relevant ministries to do what they are doing now and to cushion the citizens from the high prices of food.
Yes.
In addition to that, it must be borne in mind, because there is also a bit of ignorance that is being lobbied around, that this was not unexpected. In fact, the government did set aside 7.4 billion for this purpose. And in 2015, the government had set a whole billion again for that purpose. But again, because of the information that was relayed by the World Bank, the Fuse Network, and the CPC,
yes, as
well as the Drought Management Authority, the European Union committed a further 2.5 billion. So this is not to mean that it was not unexpected, but and one should not say that we should not blame drought. In fact, there is drought, and it is very important to understand that Tanzania itself stopped the transit of maize from Zambia through their territory to Kenya, because they were also having shortages and they wanted that maize for their own consumption. Uganda today is experiencing serious shortages of the same grain as well as sugar. In fact, sugar is more expensive in Uganda than Kenya, which you again hear people saying that people are importing from Kenya to sell it, from Uganda to sell in Kenya. It's illogical. So therefore, the people we should be asking questions are those trustees who were in charge of the strategic grain reserve. They noticed that the stocks were low. In fact, the stocks went as low as 400,000 bags, whereas we have the capacity, we have 98 silos in this country, yes, with the capacity of storing grain which can last the country, every Kenyan, without even buying for a whole 2 years. So those are the people we should be asking questions. But as to the question of the import, again, when the information I have told you, that the moment the EU and the governments in the region started reserving funds, they are international businessmen. And this I have said elsewhere, that these international businessmen do not act the way we think. Their work is to look at information by the CPC, by the Fuse Network, and then they start moving stocks. Where do we get maize in this world? Maize is only either grown in sub-Saharan Africa, the Oceania, and Southern America. Those are the only places where you have maize grown in huge tracts.
So you agree with actually the sentiment of the PS of Trade that we had, these vessels just floating on sea, waiting for a business opportunity, loaded with maize.
That is what.
So do you buy with that particular argument?
It is not that I buy.
Yes.
I am aware, as a person who is engaged in some aspect of international trade, that there are free ports in this world. Why do we call Dubai a free port? Why do we have the relationship between Haifa and Cairo port? It's simply because in those ports they have set up berths where ships with liners and carriers of bulk cargo can berth without heavy cost. And therefore, those ports are then used for transshipment to areas where that kind of cargo is required. And you do that where you expect cargo, bulk cargo like oil, wet cargo, and dry cargo like grains. And that is not strange. It's only strange in Kenya because we do not have that ability and the capacity. And in fact, the entire East Africa. In fact, it's something that we should be thinking strategically between Kenya, Tanzania, and perhaps even Somalia when they become peaceful.
Right, thank you. Let's hear from Dr. Apollos Machira. Good morning.
You know, when I look at the maize import parcel, for me, I'm seeing some high corporate crime parcel. There's a lot of criminality in it. And the problem is some of it is international crime. Because the double speak by some of our readers is so puzzling that you can see this can only be criminals. Because you cannot say that today maize is costing 180, then you do an about turn, it comes to have that price. The speed in which this story is developing, I see that there is a lot of criminality in it, and this is the anomie theory of crime, the American dream. You get rich, it doesn't matter how you get rich, whether people die or whether they don't, provided you get rich. Because we cannot say that we did not know. And that's why I keep on saying that our country, unfortunately, is a crisis-driven country. We have to wait until the very end, and then we act. And we act very fast, and sometimes in a stupid manner. You know, we are not very, very clever. So, for me, I'm seeing criminals laughing all the way to the bank, as our people are now, you know, getting happy that the maize will be, you know, we shall afford the fame. But for me, I see criminality in this.
Criminality.
Yeah.
Right. You hold with this view, Judge Musamali.
Debarl, the big question is, what is the role of the NSIS in this? Because when it comes to matters of food, this kind of thing has brought down governments. Remember the French Revolution was actually because of the shortage of bread. And it was a serious thing. And in Kenya, we started talking about Unga Revolution. And I think this is why the government moved with speed to make sure that maize is available and the price of the foodstuff has been reduced by half. And, the question is, who is sleeping on the job? Did the NSIS advise the government about this? And if they did, why was action not taken early enough to avert what we saw, the raising of the price of maize meal by 50% or almost 100%. And I think we need to ask very hard questions because, as Captain Wanderi has said, when we have that group that deals with these matters, you'll find that the CS for Interior is also a member, for the reason that this kind of thing is actually a national security threat. Because can you imagine a situation whereby we'll have everybody out on the streets demonstrating against the government because they cannot afford their staple food? I think we need to ask very hard questions about this. Why did it happen?
Right. Very hard questions. But yesterday we were given to understand the strategic grain reserve was holding around 500,000 bags that could not even last the whole day. So by now, as we're speaking right now, we presume that particular reserve is still empty if they've not loaded this particular, metric tons that came yesterday. Because we presume they won't actually be stored. They'll actually go to an inch straight away to, the retail stores as well.
Debarl, I want to combine all this. There's some criminality, there's some sloppiness. There's this laissez-faire attitude in this country that is really, really disappointing. This country has a strategic reserve quota that is supposed to be maintained at any time for purposes of ensuring that this country never goes through what we are going through. But year in, year out, we go through same problems. So I think the issue here is, even as we look at it from all aspects of politics, aspects of social issues and security, I think the question we need to be asked, and we keep on asking these questions, we never get answers. Why are those people given these positions not being held to account? Because there are people who are earning salaries in this country. There are people who are holding positions of responsibility in this country. And something like this comes out, we never hear in the National Disaster Center because it's part of their issue to ensure that this country does not go. Hunger and famine and whatever is a disaster issue.
Yes.
Because it impacts directly on the Kenyan people. We don't hear about the disaster department in the office of the president. You know, we have the NODC, and then we have a disaster section in the office of the president. These are the people who sit down and strategically plan so that this country does not go through what we are seeing. And I can tell you within three weeks, you'll now start seeing issues about floods.
Already we are seeing.
Yes, and I can assure you we shall go around this thing, we shall talk about it, and next year, people will be talking the same thing. So I think my problem is this. Why is it that in this country, people given positions of responsibility are never held to account? To me, that's where the problem is. Because we can say many things, but until that day when this country will be holding people to account for the positions and the salaries they earn, we shall be talking this year in, year out, and we shall never get. Because there are many issues that surround what we are talking. Yes, we can laugh about 3 days and the maize is at the port. We can laugh about 180 to 90 in one day. But the issue is, why do we allow our country to go through these things every year? And when people get their food and they get it at 90 shillings, they don't want to ask, where were these people holding these positions, driving big cars, reporting to the ministers and the president? And when these things are done, now we hear the Deputy President is the one who is talking, and there are people holding positions. We hear the CS talking. I don't think it is the issue about the CS, because the issue of strategic reserves and strategic planning of this country is an executive role, which is only given to the Minister for Agriculture to implement. And if we don't understand how this government functions,
yes,
then that is the biggest problem.
All right, maybe we need to question also the advisory council of the president.
Yeah.
Right, we have people, as you said, we the taxpayers, we pay money for these people to make sure they have good, advice given to the president.
Yeah.
We have the food security advisor to the president that he sits also in that security council as well. So what are they doing, first of all? And why should we always be having the same problem come every election year, right? There has to be a crisis. If it's not the dollar that is booked or the shilling that is booked, it is now maybe the grain reserve where we're having a food shortage in the country. So there has to be a crisis that somehow, as we're getting up towards general election, that will rear up its ugly head. Professor Midamba.
They're sleeping on the job. Debarl, let me first of all correct something that my younger brother Apollo said, which is you get rich in America by doing anything to become rich.
He's really touched our road now.
He did. The correct thing in America is you get rich by working hard. And I have seen it, I live there, and I watch it happen. Americans have strategic oil reserve, which is stored underground in Texas. And that oil reserve have been used in a very exceptional cases. They buy oil from Nigeria. Nigeria is the third supplier of oil to America. And they store it underground, they pump it underground. Just making sure that it never drain beyond what is expected. Now, in 2015, we had bumper crop in Kenya. In 2016, we had drought. In 2017, we have crisis. So the point is, which is very clear, the scientists that can predict weather changes for more than 10 years. Okay, these people exist in Kenya. They are international information that every single person get in Kenya, those strategic thinker, the people in charge of the strategic grain reserve. Where were they? And what happened to the information that was provided? Why we are having crisis? Why are people blaming each other at this point? And I go back to what my friend Captain Werunga said. The heads need to turn. Some of these people need to be fired. And we need to bring in people who are strategic thinker, who will help this country think ahead, you know, instead of having crisis because we are right in terms of election time. This is no thinking at all.
So we, as the analysts here, what is the way forward? Because we can see, as the Prof is saying, the heads are not rolling so far. We'll come, they'll give press conferences, then this will just step off. Yeah. We'll get another crisis, we'll forget about this. Come, maybe after 5 years again, we'll still have the same crisis. Now, if it's not maize flour, because now it has created a lot of, you know, special umbrage coming from the citizen, it will be maybe the shilling again. Captain Wanderi.
Yeah, I think it is high time we had a change of policy and philosophy in terms of how the government hires experts. Now, it is quite clear that for a very long time in Kenya, people are not hired to certain positions of power and authority on the basis of expertise and competence. The underlying or the overriding consideration is something people call loyalty. You cannot have homeboys and homegirls occupying critical positions of the state merely on the basis, perhaps, of their social origins or their surnames. And they cannot perform, they cannot execute the mandate of their offices. And this is a risk to the country. In fact, the offices which we are mentioning here, the people occupying those offices ought not only to be held to be account. In fact, if we had a serious functioning National Assembly and Senate, those are people who should be banned forever from holding any public office because they are a threat to the national security as individuals because of their incompetence and failure to exercise good judgment in terms of a crisis of this nature. In fact, if we went into another crisis, for example, we are mentioning other disasters like drought, if we had perhaps another failure in terms of energy, because food and energy are the critical issues, yes, the global, which are a threat to global peace and the world is grappling with. If we have individuals who cannot then engage their gears towards that, then we have we are on what we call auto motion, because this is what Captain Werunga said, that you have people who then wait. This is as if there is a don't care attitude, and these kind of people, we do not need them in our public service.
All right, so why is the president not making sure that these individuals who are responsible are shown the door? Dr. Apollos.
You know, the president is in China. He's bringing the standard gauge railway, so it's a bit far. But we still have the Minister for Agriculture around here. And you can see, in fact, the Minister of Agriculture used to be a very important ministry some years ago. But now I don't hear of it. I remember when I was young, we used to have the National Cereals Board. We used to have the Kenya Farmers Association. We have Kenya Seed, Coffee Board of Kenya. I don't know where these very good institutions, I don't know where they have gone. Yes, I think we have kept them far back because we don't appear to care so much about our people. And he talked about food security and its importance. Remember Zambia with unga. In fact, we are now going the Zambia way. We were laughing at Zambia that they cannot produce unga. But I couldn't imagine Kenya complaining about unga. I know my mother recently kept maize so that the maize price can go high. She was waiting for the prices to go high, only to hear that there is no maize. So she's wondering, where is that place where there is no maize? And why are they not coming to buy from me? And now we hear some merchants is out on the high seas around Mombasa, Baharini hapo, waiting to bring a ship. Then suddenly you see the Mexican maize. Maize from Mexico, you know, Mexico. Maize from Mexico with the drugs in Mexico. So I wonder whether that can be mixed up and then we can have yellow maize. So for me, I'm a very worried creature to eat maize from Mexico.
Debarl, on a serious note, I happen to come from a county that is actually a producer of maize, that is Trans Nzoia. And I'll tell you where we've gone flatly wrong as a country. When we were growing up, we used to have farms called ADC farms. And ADC farms were deliberately created by the government to supply our national reserves. They were also deliberately left to give us seed, maize seeds, flour seeds, so that we have quality seeds. And that's why we had Kenya Seed Company. Slowly, all these things were taken over by what Dr. Apollo is saying. And this country, as we speak, has very few ADC farms that were meant, because Kenya's land was distributed to the poor, so we sort of became sort of peasants. But the idea of ADC farms was to ensure that the government continues to produce en masse and store them in our grain reserves, so that in the event that the farmers fail to get what they need to have and to sell to the government to make some earning, therefore the government will always have what is enough for the country. But as we speak, most of those farms were taken over by speculators. Most of them are taken over by people. And therefore the government has no any source of ensuring that we have reserves in whatever form, whether it is milk, whether it is potato, whether it is seed. And therefore, as a country, I think what we need to ask ourselves, we've been talking about this irrigation farms. To me, if these things were made to work well, they will have replaced the loss in terms of ADC farms. So the way forward to me will be, if we want the government and whatever government at whatever time to be able to give us our national reserves and be able to supply Kenyans in the hour of need, then these so-called irrigation farms, 10,000 acres in Kulalu, 20,000 acres in Turkana, if those were used by the government and made to function, then it will revert back to give the government the way to ensure that they can have our national strategic reserves. For as long as we don't have those things put in place, with the people sleeping on their jobs, with the people always looking at these things in terms of how much will I make per day, this country will suffer this for a very long time. And then lastly, I think, Apollo, you know the issue of early warning system from IGAD.
Yes, yeah.
It is integrated in our national systems. Therefore, there's no time when this country is never informed that we are actually facing disaster in terms of shortage of maize, shortage of food. So we have this thing integrated in the region, and therefore I go back to what I said initially. We have people sleeping on their jobs. And why is the government not working? We are forgetting one person in this country, and people never talk about him, the head of public service. You see, in essence, the head of public service is supposed to be the prime minister. And he has a deputy who is supposed to be in charge of productivity in the government. So while we want to blame the president, and I'm not his gatekeeper, I think we also need to ask, what are these people doing in government? Because these are people who are supposed to deliver on what the government plans.
All right.
Yes.
Let's hear from Judge Musamali.
Debarl, I think we need to a little bit think outside the box.
Yes.
Was this thing led to happen? Because we are talking about early warning systems, they are there. People were warned early enough that we're going to have a drought in the country. But was this led to happen?
Was it deliberate?
For reasons.
Yes.
Because we are talking about an election year. Last year, we talked about El Nino. And then the government acted very quickly. Money was put aside for that. But this time round, we are looking at a situation whereby we had a warning that we're going to have drought, but nothing was done. We talk about strategic reserves. In February, I remember the Minister for Agriculture said that we have enough maize.
Yes. We heard from the Deputy President himself.
Even the Deputy President
yes,
himself,
yes.
he assured the country that there is enough maize for the country.
Yes.
2 months down the line, we are talking about having no maize. Where did this maize go to? So I'm looking at a situation whereby, for certain reasons, whether political, because we're hearing people from Jubilee telling the opposition that don't take advantage of the situation, and make political mileage out of it. The opposition is telling the government, you failed us. So are we looking at a situation whereby this is an act of sabotage by somebody for certain reasons? I think we need to ask ourselves these hard questions before we say now heads need to roll.
All right. So
Who actually failed the country?
Do you think the media also is asking the hard questions when it comes to this maize crisis and also the maize, not on the milk as well? Because we're given to understand, because we're talking about maize, milk also, the price is way up there as a sugar as well, right? And we're given to understand that Kenya produces 5.2, I think, metric tons of milk in Africa. I don't know if that is a correct figure. And this makes Kenya the highest producer of milk in Africa. Yet we are selling our packets of milk highly right now. It flies in the face of what it should be, right? If we are producing that many tons of milk, then our milk should be cheaper.
But let's look at the bigger picture. Go beyond the crisis to a bigger picture, and then think strategically about where we need to go as a country. Number one is the land use. You know, if you are in Israel, every dwelling, every settlement is on top of the mountain. All the valleys are greenfield, there for agriculture. You cannot live and spread out in the valleys like we have done. You cannot use this rich soil that we have here in Kiambu for settlement. That is not allowed in the state of Israel. Israel put more than 10% of their gross national product on agriculture. And Israel produced bumper crop which they sell to the rest of the world. We buy oranges from Israel. Israel is a desert. One time was a desert. There's no rain at all. And so we need to think logically in terms of how much do we need to spend, what percentage of gross national product do we need to spend on agriculture? And that need to be number one. Okay, before we think about anything else. Yes, we need roads, we need bridges, we need everything. We need distribution system. But we need to produce, because there are idle lands all over Kenya in very fertile area where people are doing nothing. Trans Nzoia, where my friend here is talking about, when I went there, they've taken those large, potential, huge, productive area, and people are settling and marrying more wives and spreading out on those places and not producing. And so we need to think about that. What is our land use? And how much percentage are we putting on there? And what is the role of our institution? The place where Apollo is, the Egerton, ought to be, and I argue with my friend, the Vice Chancellor from there, forget all these other things. Egerton need to be at every district, every corner of Kenya, guiding the people on the best use of the soil and the future and everything strategically. This is the only way we are going to get out of war. Otherwise, all this crisis and buying maize from a thing is a short-term solution.
Okay, we also been discussing this issue with other panelists from Monday. And the question that really comes to the fore as well is, are we having mixed priority right now? Because, of course, we have a president, as Apollo is speaking and saying that, yeah, the president is in China right now. This seems not to be taking much premium on his lot as well. But the question that we need to ask, right now that we're stashing a lot of money on SGR, which is good, right? But in the long term is when we're going to get the return of an investment from SGR as well. We have discovered, and UNESCO has discovered, the expanse of water aquifer in Turkana that can actually sustain this country for 70 good years. That we will be having, enough water to feed this country, to water this country. Why isn't the government even taking this as a critical measure right now to make sure that, yes, we have this water tapped and we have this water distributed to every corner of this country, nook and cranny, to make sure that, yes, we have enough water so that we are food secure. Shouldn't we come with a secretariat? Shouldn't we come with an organization that can actually, because they'll argue as well and say this is not, the water is very silent right now, but we have scientists who have proven that this is very potable water. Captain Wanderi, do we have a priority mixed as a country?
I'm not even sure. Kenya is very good at writing academic papers and strategies and putting them in shelves. But implementation is our biggest problem. And why do we have a problem with implementation? Because in our stage of development, we are still doing what we call primitive accumulation of capital. People do not see government and public projects as something to benefit their country and futuristic. They look at it as what is in it for me. We have just mentioned the Galana Kulalu irrigation project. We have lingering questions of integrity in terms of the implementation of that project. We even had a lot of people, a lot of Kenyans don't know in this side of the country, that in Mandera along River Daua, there was an attempt in the past to have an irrigation scheme. In Baringo, in Amaya Valley, in Pakera, there were attempts to have irrigation schemes, but they collapsed because of what we have been talking here. We have incompetent people appointed. Even if you have whatever strategies, if you have the wrong people implementing, the drafting of a strategy and implementation ought to go together. You cannot have, you cannot call Professor Midamba and Dr. Machira as experts to produce a strategy paper, then employ your home girl and homeboy who is corrupt and does not have integrity and competence to implement it. That is a problem we are having. We are not having our priorities wrong. It is it is correct right now to have infrastructure projects. Why? Because they are not current, they are futuristic. There is no country, Debarl, in this world. There is no institution, there is no organization, there is no company that has made it without borrowing. And because you borrow, you build infrastructure which you use as you grow in future, as you pay for it. You use as you pay for it. That is the best way to do it. But as long as we do not have the correct people to implement whatever strategy we come up with, we're going nowhere.
We're going nowhere. Let us stop at that for now. We shall continue this discussion on the other side of a break. But the question that really comes to the fore is, of course, are we having a leadership crisis in Kenya? All right. You can hit us on Twitter. Do we have a leadership crisis in the country? Right? Hit us on Twitter. AMLiveNTV is a Twitter handle. AMLiveNTV is a profile name on Facebook. And 20505 is our SMS portal. When we come back from the other side of a break, of course, we continue with this discussion and a raft of other issues as well. And we also take a panoramic view of what is happening internationally in terms of security as well. Once again, do you think we are facing a leadership crisis in this country? Do we have a leadership crisis? Right? Whichever way you want to slice it, make sure you hit us on Twitter. AMLiveNTV is a Twitter handle. AMLiveNTV is a profile name on Facebook, and 20505 our SMS portal.